So to start off, I want to expand this first screen to provide some additional functionality. We're going to look at adding menu bars and toolbars to our application so that we can expand that functionality. So under your toolbox, I'm going to collapse common controls and expand menus and toolbars. Now here you have just a small set of different tools, but the ones that I want to focus on will be the menu strip and the tool strip. So let's start by dragging the menu strip onto our form. This will actually mount a menu strip, and my controls are actually kind of in the way here, so let me grab them all and scoot them down. So now if I click on my menu strip up here, I will get a text box that will appear, and in that text box I can type things like file, I can hit enter, and I now have a menu. So I'm going to add additional items such as order, products, reports, and admin. I'll actually change order to say sales. Whoops. Now to get back in there and edit that item, I actually used F2 or function F2 on the Mac. Alright, so I have a file, sales, products, reports, and admin. So I'll build my application to have these areas, and I'll build specific functionality under each one of those menus. So under file, I'm just simply going to do exit. Alright, so that's the process of adding a menu. If you want to have keyboard shortcuts, so if you look at Visual Studio itself, when you click on File, there are actually keyboard shortcuts that are available, such as Alt F4, or if you're simply a keyboard person, you can hit Alt F and then things like X, and that will close Visual Studio, or N for new, or O for open. To add that functionality, you'll want to F2 back into that item, and then you want to put an ampersand in front of the keyboard shortcut character. So I'll put an ampersand in front of F, and that'll underline the F. I'll put an ampersand in front of the X, and that will underline the X for exit. And I recommend trying to follow conventions that exist. So if there's existing conventions, then utilize those conventions for people who are using your application. It'll make it much more user-friendly to them because it'll use functionality that they're already familiar with. If you start to try to reinvent conventions such as like cut, copy, and paste, when you do that, you actually start to frustrate your users because they go, why don't these keyboard shortcuts that I've learned over the last decade using Microsoft products no longer work because the programmer decided he wanted to invent his own convention instead of using the one that's been used by application developers for decades. So it's important to kind of consider that as you're building out your app. Now, if you want to add a specific piece of functionality to one of your menu items, you'll want to find it and then double click on it, just as you would a button. And that will create an event handler for you for that button. You'll notice that Visual Studio automatically gives tool strip menu items a given name based on the name they give to the menu item. So this is called the exit tool strip menu item. I'll go ahead and say this dot close to close the application. And that will close the form and then exit the application. So let's go ahead and run that and see how that works. So now we can go File and click Exit, and that closes our application. So just like any of your other event handlers for button clicks and so forth, you go to your toolstrip menu item, click event handlers, and add your code, and then you can program your application to do certain tasks based on those clicks. Adding toolbars to your project can also help with the usability of your application. Now, to add a tool strip, you'll want to first start by taking all the existing controls on your form. And what I like to do is I like to do a cut and pull them off the form. And the reason for this is that we're going to bring in what's called a tool strip container, and we're going to drop it on the form first, and then we're going to do doc fill in form. And this will take that tool strip container and expand it all the way out to dock against the entire form. And the value of using this container is that it acts as a natural median between your tool strip and the rest of your application. Now, if you click into the middle of the container and do a paste, brings all your controls back. Now we can grab tool strip and drag it and drop it into this top region of the container, and that'll mount the tool strip into the container. Now we can drop down on this and we can see the different types of items we can add to our tool strip. The most common ones are buttons. We can add labels. We can do split buttons, drop down buttons. We can even put in separators, combo boxes, text boxes, and progress bars. You'll see within Visual Studio that there's a pretty good variety of different items up here. We have the back and forward navigation, our save and open options, undo and redo, our build options, as well as additionals. And this is also dynamic and it changes depending on the context that we are within Visual Studio. But for this case, what we're going to do is we'll probably just add a simple button for now. And with this button, it comes with its own set of properties. So if we open up our properties dialog, we can see here that we have different things like images, there's color options. You can also set names for your buttons, obviously. So I'm going to call this my TSB exit button. And we're going to set an image for that button. Now, when you grab images, you can import them from your local drive, or you can pull them from resource files. So I'm just going to go out to Google real fast, and we'll do a quick search, a quick image search for an exit icon. And we'll go with something like this. So actually, let's see if we can find something just a little smaller. So we'll go search tools, size, and we're looking for an icon. So let's go with this door. I like this one. That's still pretty big. 128 by 128, that's not too bad. So we'll view image, right click, I'm going to do save image, and I'll just save it to my desktop. And then come back into Visual Studio and do an import from my desktop, and I'll grab my icon and hit OK. And that sets the icon on my button. Now to add an event handler to this button, it's just like any other button. You double click on it. It'll bring up the event handler. And this is something that I'm going to show you that may actually save you some time in the future. So we have a toolstrip menu item that does an exit, but we also have this button now. Now, since they're both correlated together, instead of calling this.close, we can actually call this click event because it is a function. So I'm going to copy that function name, I'm going to paste it in here, and then I'm going to pass in 2 arguments. Each one of your event handlers takes 2 arguments. It's typically the object, and then there's an event args. So that object is the sender, or the person who called the event, and that's normally the button or the item itself, the control. In this case, I'm going to pass in the sender that's coming from my button click from my toolbar, and then I'm going to pass in E as those event args and hit semicolon. So doing that, now what happens is when that toolbar button gets clicked, it actually will go and call the toolstrip menu item exit, and then that will cause the form to be closed. So we'll save that and we'll run it. And now if we click on this menu item, it closes the application. So that's how you can add toolbars and menu items to your application to give it additional functionality. Something to keep in mind is that now that we have additional items, we have sales, so we can do a new sale. We could also do returns, and we can add those ampersands there to help with keyboard users. And what this will do for us is that when we click on these items, we can then open new dialog boxes or new windows of our application to facilitate those particular pieces of functionality. Or maybe we do something as simple as resetting this order to a new order and we delete out all the items that are currently in the order. So it's really up to your choosing on how you want to utilize those menus and those toolbars, but adding them to your application adds a lot of functionality and usability to your end user.